Usually when we talk about going to the hospital for like a routine procedure, there's this underlying, um, almost invisible expectation of absolute safety.
Right, yeah. You just assume it's going to be fine.
Exactly. It's like boarding a commercial airplane,
Right.
right? You don't really sit there thinking about the aerodynamics or the jet engines keeping, you know, thousands of pounds of metal in the sky. You just expect to land.
You trust the system implicitly. And why wouldn't you? We've basically spent the last 80 years building this massive medical infrastructure that practically guarantees that safety.
Yeah, you go in for a C-section or, I don't know, a knee replacement, and the doctors just do their highly trained thing. Your expectation is just this smooth, predictable runway to recovery. It's clean, it's routine.
It's a calculated, almost negligible risk in the minds of those patients today.
Because it feels like modern medicine has built this massive, impenetrable concrete wall between us and the microscopic world. Like, we think of bacteria as this trivial annoyance that we basically solved back in the 1940s.
But the thing is, and this is what we're getting into today, when you actually start looking at the current global health data, that impenetrable concrete wall starts looking a lot more like a rusted chain link fence.
Oh, wow. That's a terrifying image.
It really is, because specifically when you look at the infectious disease modeling for the next decade, we are currently navigating a medical landscape that is rapidly and quite frankly, terrifyingly unraveling.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because the premise of what we are looking at today completely shatters that illusion of safety.
Completely.
I mean, we've got this massive stack of sources on the table today. We're looking at the Belgian One Health National Action Plan for 2026 to 2030, various WHO reports, academic papers on antimicrobial resistance, business plans for these Prima kiosks, and some incredibly striking clinical presentations from Dr. Kadiyali Srivatsa regarding this Dr. Maya GPT system.
Yeah, it's a lot of material, but it all points to the exact same crisis.
Right, so to you listening, imagine a world where going in for that routine C-section or that standard hip replacement just isn't a safe bet anymore. Imagine it's literally a coin toss for your survival.
A literal 50-50 flip.
Yeah, whether you walk out of the hospital or succumb to an infection that no drug on earth can stop.
I know it sounds like the setup for some dystopian thriller movie, but what we are going to dissect today is not speculative fiction. It's the rigorously modeled statistical trajectory for the year 2035.
Which really isn't that far away.
No, it's not. And the runway leading up to that year is much, much shorter than anyone wants to admit.
Which is exactly our mission for this deep dive. So welcome to the conversation. Today we're looking at a deeply unsettling but honestly fundamentally necessary reality check regarding global health security.
We have to talk about it.
We do. We're going to explore why the systems we rely on are almost entirely blind to an impending tipping point. A tipping point that researchers are calling the 2028 AMR tsunami.
The 2028 tsunami, yeah, that's the year everything shifts.
And more importantly, we're going to explore the radical, necessary paradigm shift required to actually survive it. Because the overriding theme across all these sources is that our stubborn reliance on, discovering the next endless miracle cure is just, it's failing.
It's a completely broken model at this point.
Right. We have to fundamentally rethink our relationship with medicine, moving away from that and toward a decentralized system of early triage, isolation, and prevention.
And to understand why this shift is so critical, we really first have to understand the nature of the threat itself, because it operates completely differently from the crises we are used to dealing with.
Like COVID, you mean?
Exactly. When we hear the word pandemic, our collective memory immediately jumps back to 2020.
Right, yeah. Lockdowns, masks, the daily death tolls on the news ticker, supply chains just totally breaking down.
Precisely. We are psychologically, and I'd say institutionally, conditioned to react to what epidemiologists call the loud pandemics.
The loud pandemics. Okay, I like that term.
Yeah, so a novel virus emerges, right? It sweeps across the globe in a matter of weeks. The sirens blare, and the entire global economy just grinds to a halt. We saw it with COVID-19. We saw it with the intense militarized responses to localized outbreaks of Ebola.
Because the shock is just so sudden, it's right in your face.
Exactly. It's sudden, it's photogenic, and it's violent. These crises command our immediate, undivided attention. But the data we are looking at today highlights a very different kind of crisis. They refer to antimicrobial resistance as the silent catastrophe.
The silent catastrophe. So for you listening who might just know the acronym antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, it's the biological process where pathogens, so we're talking bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, they evolve to survive the very medicines that we designed to kill them.
That's the textbook definition, yeah.
But I don't want to just leave it at the word evolve because that sounds so passive. How exactly are these microscopic organisms outsmarting billions of dollars of modern pharmacology?
It is a fascinating, albeit terrifying, display of evolutionary biology. I mean, bacteria don't evolve the way mammals do over millions of years.
Right, they're fast.
Incredibly fast. A single E. coli bacterium can divide and replicate every 20 minutes. So in a single day, you are looking at dozens of generations.
Wow.
And during that rapid replication, random mutations happen. Some of those genetic mutations might inadvertently create a microscopic defense mechanism against an antibiotic.
It's like what does that look like?
Well, maybe it thickens the cell wall, right? So the drug can't get in. Or, and this is crazy, maybe it creates a pump that literally spits the antibiotic drug back out of the cell before it can do any damage.
Wait, really? They literally install tiny biological sump pumps to just bail out the medication.
They do.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And the most dangerous part isn't just that they mutate, it's how they share that mutation.
What do you mean share?
Bacteria engage in something called horizontal gene transfer. They have these small circular DNA molecules called plasmids that float around independently of their main chromosome. If a bacterium develops a genetic cheat code to survive penicillin, it can copy that plasmid and physically hand it over to a neighboring bacteria.
You're kidding.
I'm not. And it doesn't even have to be the same species of bacteria. They are crowdsourcing their defenses in real time.
So it's like an open source biological arms race.
Yeah.
And they are sharing the blueprints for our destruction on like a microscopic dark web.
That is a remarkably accurate way to frame it, actually. And the scale of this silent evolution is just staggering. Let's look at the methodology and the findings of the 2019 Graham study from the sources.
Oh, yeah, the Graham study. That was huge.
Monumental piece of research. It was published in The Lancet, analyzing the global burden of bacterial antimicrobial resistance. And they didn't just look at a few hospitals.
No, they looked at massive amounts of data.
Right. They aggregated data from hundreds of millions of individual records across hundreds of countries. And what they found was that in 2019 alone, 1.27 million people died directly from drug-resistant infections.
Directly, meaning the infection itself, unimpeded by our failing drugs, was the primary cause of death.
Yes, exactly. But in epidemiological modeling, you also have to look at the collateral damage. So the Graham study found that another roughly 5 million deaths were associated with a drug-resistant infection.
Wait, break that down for me. What is the actual distinction between a direct death and an associated death in a clinical setting? Like, how does that play out in an ICU?
Okay, so imagine a patient comes into the hospital after a severe car accident. They have massive internal trauma, but the surgeons stabilize them.
Okay, so they survived the crash.
Right. They are in the ICU, recovering, but their immune system is highly compromised from all that trauma. Then they contract a drug-resistant strain of pneumonia from the ventilator.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The antibiotics fail to clear the pneumonia, their oxygen levels plummet, and the resulting strain causes a fatal heart attack. So the heart attack, or the initial blunt force trauma, might be listed on some paperwork as the primary cause of death. But the drug-resistant pneumonia was the critical associating factor that pushed them over the edge. The infection was the fatal catalyst.
5 million people. 5 million. And just to put that into a framework we all we all really understand, in 2020, the year the entire world stopped, the year we fundamentally altered human socialization.
Yeah, the COVID year.
Right. The WHO reported 1.8 million deaths from COVID-19. So we had this incredibly loud pandemic that literally shut down the globe, while quietly in the background, AMR had already been operating at a statistically similar, if not vastly greater, level of lethality.
It's wild when you put the numbers side by side.
But there were no lockdowns for AMR, no daily press briefings, no emergency stimulus checks.
And that is the crux of why it flies under the radar. It's a slow-burning catastrophe. Unlike a single novel virus that hits everyone simultaneously with the exact same symptoms, AMR is a multi-front, gradual deterioration of our existing medical shield.
It's just everywhere, all at once, but quietly.
Right. It's a cancer patient in London developing an untreatable blood infection. It's a premature infant in New Delhi succumbing to a resistant strain of sepsis. It's happening disparately across totally different demographics and different diseases.
Which brings up a staggering data point from the clinical research cited by Dr. David Chynam in the materials. He's from Renaissance University. The current estimates suggest that more than 70% of all pathogenic bacteria are now resistant to at least one commercially available antibiotic.
More than 70%.
That's insane. Our arsenal is literally firing blanks over two-thirds of the time.
It is, and to understand why that percentage is so high, we really have to look outside the human hospital entirely.
Outside the hospital.
Yeah. This is where the WHO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and the World Organization for Animal Health come in. They've been heavily promoting what they call the One Health framework.
Oh, One Health. I've seen that term constantly in the policy documents, especially in that Belgian National Action Plan we're going to discuss later. What does One Health actually mean in practice?
So it is the fundamental recognition that human health is not isolated. It is intrinsically linked to animal health, plant health, and the health of the shared global environment.
Okay, so it's all connected.
Exactly. AMR is not just a human issue. When you consider that a vast proportion of all antibiotics manufactured globally are given to livestock.
Wait, really, the majority goes to animals?
Oh, absolutely. And not just to treat sick animals, but prophylactically. They just feed it to them to prevent disease in cramped industrial farming conditions.
Oh.
When you realize that, you see we're creating a massive evolutionary training ground. The animals excrete the antimicrobial residues and the resistant bacteria, which then flow into the soil, into the groundwater, and into our agricultural runoff.
So we are essentially soaking the entire planetary ecosystem in a low-dose bath of antibiotics, giving the bacteria constant low-level exposure so they can just, practice their defenses.
That's exactly what's happening. We are actively training them to defeat our best weapons before they ever even enter a human body.
Man, I need to pause here because there's a massive contradiction staring us right in the face.
What's that?
Well, if the numbers are this staggering, millions dead, 70% of pathogens showing resistance, entire ecosystems contaminated, and we've known about this. I mean, looking at the historical data and the sources, there was a major CDC report sounding the alarm back in 2013.
Right, over a decade ago.
Yeah. In 2015, President Obama issued a National Security Council directive specifically on AMR. In 2016, the UN General Assembly declared it a global crisis.
They've been trying to get attention on it.
Right. But if the highest levels of global governance have been ringing the bell loudly for over a decade, why are we acting like everything is fine? Why is the public perception still, oh, I'll just go to the doctor, take a pill, and get better?
It really comes down to the limitations of human psychology regarding risk assessment.
Okay, how so?
We are evolutionarily wired to react to sudden, immediate changes in our environment. A tiger jumping out of the bushes triggers an immediate response, right?
Sure, fight or flight.
But a slow change in the climate or a microscopic evolution occurring gradually over a decade, that does not trigger our fight or flight response. We just acclimate to it.
Let me try to visualize this. Let's say the entire global health apparatus is a house.
Okay.
A loud pandemic, like COVID-19, is a tornado. You hear the sirens, you see the funnel cloud coming, it rips the roof off, it shatters the windows, everyone scrambles, emergency services are mobilized. The damage is immediate, terrifying, and you can take a picture of it for the news.
Great analogy, yes.
But AMR, on the other hand, is a termite infestation. It's a colony of millions of termites that has been living in the floorboards for decades. You don't see them, you don't hear them, but they are slowly, methodically hollowing out the structural foundation of the house, while we are all just standing on the porch staring at the sky, stressing about the next tornado.
That is an incredibly apt way to put it. We are so busy scanning the horizon for the next viral storm that we aren't feeling the floorboards getting softer under our feet.
Yeah, the scary part is, with termites, by the time you notice them.
Exactly. The catastrophic problem with the termite infestation is that the damage is geometric, not linear. By the time the floor actually buckles and collapses under your weight, it is far too late to just go to the hardware store and buy a can of bug spray. The structural integrity is permanently gone.
And according to the epidemiological models we're looking at in these sources, those floorboards are going to give way much, much sooner than the distant, abstract year of 2050 that politicians usually throw around.
2050 is way too optimistic.
Right. The termites aren't just eating the wood, they are accelerating their consumption.
And this brings us directly to the clinical presentations from Dr. Kadiyali Srivatsa. Specifically, he has this stark analysis slide titled The Seismic Spike and the Rising Tide.
I saw that slide. It's chilling.
He outlines a highly specific, rapidly approaching timeline based on current resistance trajectories. He argues forcefully that the global health security apparatus is entirely blind to the cliff we are literally about to drive off in the year 2028.
So let's walk through this timeline, year by year, because this is where the abstract numbers become intimately, frighteningly real for you listening.
Yeah, let's break it down.
According to the warnings synthesized in the Dr. Maya Diagnostic Framework presentations, we are no longer in the prevention phase. We have already crossed the danger line.
We crossed it a while ago.
The data indicates that by 2025, global antimicrobial resistance reached an average of 42%. So we are currently living in the red zone.
Yes, and understanding that 42% threshold is critical. It means that nearly half the time, our standard first-line empiric therapies, the drugs a doctor reaches for first, because they are usually safe and effective, they're compromised, they fail.
Almost a coin flip already for the first line.
Exactly. But the timeline accelerates aggressively from there. The presentation points to 2028 as the tipping point.
2028, that is terrifyingly close. What exactly tips in 2028?
2028 is the year where the mathematical models assert that major surgeries cross the threshold from being routine, safe procedures to becoming high-risk endeavors worldwide.
So going back to our earlier example, if you need a knee surgery or, say, an emergency appendectomy in 2028, the risk of acquiring a postoperative infection that doctors physically cannot treat spikes massively.
It shoots through the roof.
You survive the actual surgery, the cutting and sewing, but you die from the recovery.
Precisely. Because right now, the only reason those surgeries are as safe as they are is because of prophylactic antibiotics. Doctors pump you full of broad-spectrum drugs before they even make an incision to ensure any stray bacteria that get into the wound are immediately neutralized.
Right, they pre-treat you.
Yes. But once those prophylactic drugs fail, opening the human body in a hospital setting becomes an incredibly dangerous gamble, and the model continues to deteriorate rapidly from there. By 2030, which Dr. Srivatsa refers to as the pandemic window, overall resistance hits 58%.
58%.
But it's not just the pathogens getting stronger, right? It's the human medical system breaking down under the weight of the infections. The model suggests that by 2030, global healthcare capacity falls to just 35%.
Wait. Explain the mechanics of that capacity collapse. Why does a rise in bacterial resistance cause a hospital's physical capacity to plummet? I mean, the beds are still there, right?
Right, the beds are there, but it's a compounding operational failure. Think about it. When a patient has a resistant infection, they don't just get better in 3 days and go home. They stay in the ICU for 3 weeks. They require incredibly intense 24/7 nursing care. They require complex, expensive isolation protocols to stop them from infecting the rest of the ward.
So they just drain the resources.
Heavily. This burns out the staff, monopolizes the beds, and drains the hospital's financial resources. You reach a point where a hospital might physically have 500 beds, sure, but because 300 of them are occupied by long-term isolating AMR patients, their capacity to intake new traumas, heart attacks, or strokes is just decimated.
So the system just gridlocks.
Exactly.
And then, according to this timeline, we hit 2035, the year of the coin toss. By 2035, overall resistance reaches 68%, and global healthcare capacity completely collapses to just 20%.
And what's absolutely vital to understand here is how the source material addresses a very common and very dangerous misconception in public health modeling regarding these long-term charts.
The plateau, right?
Yes, the plateau. Often, when you look at an epidemiological graph projecting from, say, 2018 out to 2050, the curve of resistance goes up very steeply, and then eventually it seems to flatten out. It plateaus.
Right. And our human nature, especially post-COVID, makes us look at a flattening curve and think, oh, thank God we flattened the curve. The situation stabilizes. We reach a new manageable normal.
That is exactly the instinct. But in the context of AMR, that is a fatal misreading of the mathematics. That plateau does not mean stability.
It doesn't.
No. As the source material explicitly details, the plateau represents systemic ecological collapse.
Wait, what do you mean collapse?
The curve of resistance only slows down because of population decline, total health system failure, complete antibiotic exhaustion, and absolute environmental saturation.
Oh, wow. So the bacteria stopped spreading, not because we fought them off, but because they literally ran out of human bodies to infect.
Yes. The curve plateaus because the host population has been decimated. Humanity can no longer support the pathogen's further exponential growth. The plateau isn't a victory, it's the aftermath.
That is incredibly chilling.
Yeah.
Let's translate those macro statistics back into the daily medical reality we face just to really ground this. We talked about C-sections earlier. Right now, a C-section has a roughly 99% success rate globally in terms of avoiding fatal maternal infection.
Very same procedure today.
Under these 2035 models, that success rate drops to 68%. You're looking a mother in the eye and telling her that she has a nearly 1 in 3 chance of severe, potentially fatal complications just from the surgery required to deliver her baby.
It's a complete reversal of modern medical progress.
And hip replacements, a procedure that restores mobility and quality of life to millions of elderly people. It falls from a 95% success rate to 42%.
And for those who are already vulnerable, the mortality numbers are just devastating. ICU mortality for patients who contract these highly resistant infections is projected to range anywhere from 26% to a staggering 80%, depending on the specific pathogen and the region.
Up to 80% mortality.
Yeah. When those empiric antibiotics fail, the onset of sepsis, where the body's immune system overreacts to the infection and starts shutting down its own organs, it strikes much earlier and much harder. And because our absolute last resort drugs are also failing, doctors are literally left standing at the bedside with nothing but supportive care, just watching a patient decline.
Which begs a massive structural question for me. We understand the biology of how bacteria mutate. We get that. But why is the curve accelerating so incredibly fast right now? Why are the bugs winning the arms race by such an overwhelming margin in this specific decade?
It is the collision of microscopic biology and massive human globalization. First, there is the fundamental mismatch in speed. Bacteria evolve exponentially faster than our pharmaceutical industry can function.
How slow is pharma?
It takes a minimum of 10 years and often over $1 billion to research, develop, run clinical trials, and approve a single new class of antibiotic.
10 years and $1 billion.
Correct. And as we discussed earlier, a bacterium can mutate and share its resistance genes with 1 million of its neighbors over a long weekend. The math just doesn't work in our favor.
We're bringing a 10-year sword to a laser fight.
Exactly. And second, human mobility is totally unprecedented. 100 years ago, a resistant strain of cholera in a remote village might just burn itself out because the villagers didn't travel.
Right. It stayed local.
But today, a businessman can contract a highly resistant gut bacteria in a local market in Southeast Asia, board a flight, and excrete that bacteria into the sewage system of London or New York within 18 hours.
The hyperconnectivity of our modern world is basically acting as a superhighway for the pathogens.
Exactly. Combine that hypermobility with weak, slow diagnostics that fail to identify resistant strains quickly, and you have infections spreading invisibly across borders before the health agencies even know what they're looking at.
To really hammer home the scale of this trajectory, there's a BBC Ideas feature included in our sources, and it cites this massive data modeling project. They didn't just look at a few thousand cases, they modeled 494 million patient records.
Almost 500 million.
500 million data points. And the conclusion they arrived at was a prediction that by the year 2050, 10 million people will die every single year from superbugs. 10 million a year. The researcher in the video doesn't mince words. He literally calls it a post-antibiotic apocalypse.
And this raises the most uncomfortable question of all, honestly.
What's that?
If the timeline is this dire, if the data is this robust and undeniable, how is human behavior actually contributing to this acceleration? Why are the very medical tools that miraculously saved us in the 20th century now the instruments of our extreme vulnerability in the 21st?
I think we need to look deeply at what Dr. Srivatsa calls the elephant in the doctor's room, because the sources we are reviewing are incredibly critical of our foundational medical mindset.
They really tear into it.
For almost a century, essentially since Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin, we have been hopelessly addicted to the dream of the miracle cure. We've operated under this hubristic assumption that human engineering can just permanently outpace billions of years of microbial adaptation. We think we could just invent a bigger hammer every time the bacteria build a stronger shield.
It's a fundamentally flawed strategy because it completely ignores the laws of evolution. And the daily reality of clinical primary care exposes the fatal cracks in the strategy every single day. Let's consider the immense systemic pressure placed on general practitioners.
Okay, let's do that. Walk me through that. I'm a GP, it's 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I'm exhausted. What is happening in my exam room?
A patient comes into your clinic, they have a terrible sore throat, a fever, they are coughing, they feel awful, they had to take unpaid time off work to come see you, they want a solution, and most importantly, they expect a pill. They expect you to cure them.
Right, it's like, Doc, I've got a massive presentation tomorrow. Just give me a Z-Pack so I can get back to my life.
Exactly. And you, the GP, are allotted maybe 10 to 15 minutes for this consultation. You don't have the time, nor do you have an instantaneous, highly accurate point-of-care diagnostic tool to definitively prove whether this infection is bacterial, which antibiotics might actually help, or viral, against which antibiotics are completely useless.
So what do? I've got 5 minutes left. They're demanding drugs.
You face immense psychological and professional pressure to just prescribe an antibiotic to manage the patient's expectations, avoid a negative review, and get them out the door so you can see the next patient.
That's so real.
It is. The sources cite a deeply concerning statistic from the UK indicating that roughly 20% of all antibiotic prescriptions issued in primary care are clinically unnecessary.
1 in 5.
1 in 5. They are being handed out for viral infections like the common cold or influenza, or for very minor bacterial infections that a healthy immune system could clear on its own in a few days.
But wait, it gets fundamentally worse because of what kind of antibiotics they're prescribing, right? Because the doctor doesn't know exactly which bug is causing the problem, they don't use a sniper rifle, they use a shotgun. They prescribe broad-spectrum antibiotics.
Yes. When a narrow-spectrum antibiotic, one designed to target a very specific family of bacteria, would suffice, doctors often default to broad-spectrum drugs because it just covers all their bases. It's defensive prescribing.
Let me break down the biology of why that is so devastating, because I think this is the real aha moment for understanding the crisis.
Go for it.
Using a broad-spectrum antibiotic to treat a minor sinus infection is like trying to deal with a single burglar in your house by dropping a thermobaric bomb on your entire neighborhood.
That's intense, but yeah.
It wipes out everything. It kills the bad bacteria causing your sinus pain, sure. But it also absolutely massacres all the good symbiotic bacteria in your gut microbiome.
And the gut microbiome is essentially the command center for your entire immune system.
Exactly. We have trillions of beneficial bacteria that help us digest food, regulate inflammation, fight off invaders. A broad-spectrum antibiotic turns your gut into a blasted wasteland.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Yes. In that ecological vacuum, the surviving bacteria, the ones that happen to have a random genetic mutation that let them survive the bomb, they wake up to find they have zero competition for food or resources. They multiply exponentially, and suddenly you have just converted your own body into a highly efficient factory for drug-resistant superbugs.
It's tragic when you frame it that way.
We're literally trying to put out a grease fire by pouring water on it. We throw more broad-spectrum antibiotics at the problem, and the splash just spreads the resistance faster and wider.
That is a very powerful, biologically accurate analogy. We are destroying our own internal ecosystems. But to understand the true scale of the grease fire, we have to look beyond human medicine again.
Back to the farms.
Back to agriculture. Let's pull some data from that incredibly dense, incredibly vital Belgian One Health National Action Plan for 2026 to 2030.
I read through that Belgian NAP document. It is heavy on the policy jargon, but it is super eye-opening regarding how governments are finally trying to institutionalize a defense against this.
It is a blueprint for national survival. The document reveals a fascinating retrospective. Between 2011 and 2024, the total sales of antibiotics for use in animals in Belgium fell by 60%.
Okay, that sounds good.
And even more impressively, the sales of critical antibiotics, the real heavy hitters, fell by 81%. Now, on paper, that sounds like a massive victory, and it is certainly a testament to the co-regulation model they established with a group called AMCRA.
Right. But I actually want to push back on calling that a pure victory.
Why is that?
Because if you think about it logically, the fact that they could arbitrarily drop antibiotic usage by 60% and still maintain a highly functioning, profitable agricultural sector tells you just how obscenely, almost criminally over-medicated those animals were to begin with.
Ah, yeah, that's a very fair point.
They weren't using these drugs to treat sick cows and pigs. They were using them as an industrial crutch.
You are absolutely right. Historically, antibiotics in agriculture have been used heavily as growth promoters. It literally helps the animals put on weight faster. And it acts as a cheap prophylactic alternative to providing sanitary, less crowded living conditions.
So it was just an economic shortcut.
Exactly, an economic shortcut with catastrophic biological consequences. And the Belgian authorities know the job isn't nearly done. Their new 2030 target is to push for a 70% total reduction compared to their 2011 baseline and a 90% reduction in those critical antibiotics.
And one of the most vital details in that plan is their active phase-out of a specific drug called colistin in agriculture.
Uh-huh.
They are aiming to limit its sale to just 1 milligram per kilogram of biomass per year. Why is colistin the hill they are choosing to die on?
Because colistin is the ultimate last resort drug in human medicine.
The very last line of defense.
Right. It is an incredibly old antibiotic that doctors actually stopped using decades ago because it is highly toxic to human kidneys.
Oh, wow. So they only brought it back because they had to.
Yes. As AMR has worsened and all our modern, safer drugs have failed, doctors have been forced to pull colistin out of retirement. It works by literally punching holes in the outer cell membrane of gram-negative bacteria, causing the cell to leak and die. When an ICU patient has an infection that is resistant to literally every other drug on the planet, colistin is the final string tying them to life.
So using colistin prophylactically in healthy herds of pigs is essentially handing the blueprints of our absolute last line of defense over to the bacteria for daily target practice.
Exactly. It is epidemiological suicide.
Man. So let's look at the board here. We had this massive multi-system failure. GPs are hopelessly trapped in a cycle of overprescribing because of systemic time crunches and immense patient pressure. Agriculture is only just beginning to rein in decades of profitable overuse. And meanwhile, the bugs are getting exponentially faster and smarter.
It's a bleak picture.
So I have to ask you, looking at this holistic mess, if the answer isn't in a new pill, if the pharmaceutical pipeline is fundamentally broken, how do we actually get doctors and patients to break this toxic cycle of demand and supply? What is the actual solution here?
The sources, particularly the clinical frameworks proposed alongside the PRIMA deployments, argue forcefully that the answer lies in a radical philosophical redesign of how we identify and respond to symptoms before the patient ever reaches the doctor's waiting room.
Before they even leave the house.
Right. We have to stop relying on retroactive curing, chasing the bacteria with chemicals after they have already invaded, and shift our entire health apparatus toward proactive prevention and strict isolation.
Which brings us to the core paradigm shift of this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
The pivot from the failing miracle cure to decentralized, intelligent triage.
Yes.
Let's talk about Dr. Maya GPT, the AI-based healthcare architecture designed by Dr. Srivatsa. And I want to be super clear for the listener. This is not just another generic, clunky symptom checker you find on a medical insurance website that tells you to call 911 for a paper cut.
Right, we've all seen those. They're terrible.
They are. But this is a complete reimagining of the first point of contact in the healthcare journey.
It is an algorithmic gatekeeper. The foundational architecture of the Dr. Maya system is its highly calibrated, color-coded triage framework. It takes the infinite chaotic complexity of human medical symptoms and, using vast epidemiological data sets, distills them into 4 distinct, actionable, and strictly defined clinical categories.
Let's break down those 4 exact colors, because this is the absolute core of the new philosophy.
Okay, let's do it.
First, there is red. This is pretty straightforward. Red signifies an emergency. These are life-threatening acute symptoms: sudden severe chest pain radiating down the arm, sudden loss of vision, stroke symptoms, major trauma.
The system's instruction there is non-negotiable. Immediately seek hospital care or call an ambulance.
Right. Then there is yellow. This represents mild symptoms, things like a minor tension headache, mild seasonal allergies, or a superficial scrape. The guidance here bypasses the doctor entirely, right?
Correct. Consult a pharmacist or a chemist and manage the condition at home with over-the-counter support. Don't clog the clinic.
Next is green. These are moderate symptoms that require attention, but are safe for nurse-led management. You don't need a specialist or an ICU bed. A trained nurse practitioner in a community clinic can handle it safely and effectively.
And finally, we arrive at blue. This is the most critical category when discussing the survival of our antibiotic efficacy. Blue indicates a suspected infectious disease.
Suspected infection.
Okay. And the immediate, non-negotiable instruction for a blue code is isolate immediately and consult a healthcare provider remotely via telemedicine to prevent cross-infection.
Isolate. That is the magic word here. It means don't get on a crowded bus. Don't go sit in a poorly ventilated clinic waiting room next to an elderly person undergoing chemotherapy or a pregnant woman. Stay in your house.
If we pull back and look at the macro implications of this, the Dr. Maya system fundamentally shifts the behavioral economics of healthcare. It moves it from a reactive, antibiotic-heavy approach to a proactive isolation and prevention model.
That's a huge behavioral shift, though.
Massive. For decades, the ingrained societal model has been, You feel sick. You physically travel to a medical facility. You sit in a room mingling with other vulnerable people. You demand a cure from an exhausted doctor. You receive an antibiotic script, and you go back to your normal life, spreading whatever you have.
Right. That's just Tuesday for most people.
But the Dr. Maya model is a hard circuit breaker. You feel sick, you identify the clinical risk level immediately from your own home, and if it's infectious, you cut off the transmission chain right then and there.
And beyond the epidemiology, there is a really fascinating psychological component to this shift. We have an audio source in the stack titled Why Your Brain Projects Imaginary Fear. It dives into the psychology of what happens when you wake up at 2 a.m. with a weird, unexplained symptom and you start frantically searching the internet.
Oh, the classic web search spiral. We've all been there. You input a slight headache and a mild fever, and an hour later, the search engine has convinced you that you have an incurable tropical brain-eating amoeba, and you have days to live.
Exactly. Standard symptom checkers are essentially anxiety engines. They give you a bulleted list of potential diseases ranging from the common cold to stage 4 cancer, and human nature guarantees your brain immediately latches on to the worst-case scenario.
It induces a panic response.
Right. But the audio source highlights how the Dr. Maya color-coded system acts as a psychological circuit breaker. It replaces that late-night catastrophic, anxiety-ridden search with a definitive, validated category.
It gives you boundaries.
Yeah, it doesn't give you a terrifying list of diseases you can't pronounce. It gives you a color and an action plan. If it spits out a yellow code, you feel immense immediate relief. Okay, it's categorized as mild. I just need to drink water and go to the pharmacy tomorrow. It completely strips away the imaginary fear that drives unnecessary ER visits.
And crucially, the sources emphasize the strict clinical boundaries of this AI. Dr. Maya does not prescribe medication.
That's important. It's not a robot doctor giving out pills.
Right. It cannot issue a script for an antibiotic. It is a triage tool, not a digital doctor handing out digital pills. Its value is in removing subjective human errors from the initial assessment.
Like doctor fatigue.
Exactly. It doesn't suffer from the fatigue of a GP at the end of a 12-hour shift, and it isn't swayed by the bias of an aggressive, demanding patient. It applies clinical reasoning strictly based on symptom clustering and epidemiological data. And most importantly, regarding the AMR crisis, its underlying algorithm ensures that absolutely zero antibiotics are ever recommended or pathway approved for viral symptom clusters.
Okay, wait. I have to play devil's advocate here and offer some real pushback.
Go ahead.
We're talking about human beings, not logical robots.
Right.
You're telling me this AI app gives a blue code for suspected infection and tells the patient to stay home. But human nature dictates that a panicked parent with a sick, crying child isn't going to just trust an app. They want a human doctor to look at their kid, just in case.
That's a very common reaction.
How does the Dr. Maya model actually override the deeply ingrained human panic response?
That is the exact hurdle public health officials face. But the system overrides panic not by telling the parent to ignore the symptom, but by validating it and providing an immediate alternate pathway to care that doesn't involve a physical waiting room.
Okay, walk me through that.
Let's look at an illustrative example to make the mechanics concrete. The implementation proposal for the CDC included in our materials details a scenario called Case 1, the concerned parent.
Oh, I remember reading that one.
Yeah. Imagine a parent whose child wakes up with a mild fever, a runny nose, and a sore throat. Historically, that parent's instinct, driven by love and fear, is to rush the child to the pediatrician's clinic. They want professional reassurance.
Right, which is the completely understandable universal human impulse. You want your kid to be okay.
100%. But in acting on that impulse, what actually happens? They drag a highly contagious, almost certainly viral bug into a pediatrician's waiting room full of other children, infants, and stressed parents.
So they're spreading it immediately.
Yes. Then the doctor, pressed for time and dealing with a highly anxious parent who expects a tangible result from the visit, might write a script for a mild antibiotic just in case it develops into a secondary bacterial infection. Or, honestly, simply to make the parent feel they were heard and treated.
Which brings us back to the unnecessary 20% of prescriptions. But under the new paradigm, how does it play out?
Under the Dr. Maya paradigm, the parent inputs the precise symptoms into the app. The algorithm processes the combination fever, runny nose, sore throat, weighs it against current local epidemiological data regarding, say, flu season or RSV outbreaks, and confidently outputs a blue code. suspected viral infection.
Okay.
The instruction is clear and authoritative. Keep the child isolated at home. Treat the fever with over-the-counter reducers. But then the app connects the parent directly to a remote telehealth consultation.
Ah, so they still get to speak to a professional.
Exactly. They get that psychological need for reassurance satisfied, but they do it through a screen.
And look at the systemic outcome of that. The child rests comfortably at home instead of sitting in a sterile, uncomfortable clinic.
The transmission chain is permanently broken because the child didn't physically enter the community.
A completely unnecessary, gut-destroying antibiotic prescription is entirely avoided. And a physical spot in the doctor's waiting room is left open for a child who genuinely has a severe, acute bacterial issue that needs physical examination.
It's an elegant, systemic decoupling of panic from physical movement.
It is brilliant. But I have another logistical pushback.
Let's hear it.
An app on a smartphone is a wonderful tool for someone sitting in a suburb with a 5G connection and a high degree of digital literacy. But AMR is a global crisis. The resistant bacteria mutating in rural villages today will be in London hospitals tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you possibly scale this high-tech triage philosophy to protect millions of people in regions with fewer medical resources, lower literacy, and, spotty internet infrastructure?
And that is exactly where the hardware infrastructure comes in. This brings us to the Prima kiosks.
The Prima kiosks, yes.
We have the comprehensive business and deployment plan for rolling out Prima kiosks across India. A Prima kiosk is essentially a standalone, physically robust triage terminal. And its most critical feature is that it is entirely offline capable.
Offline. Wow.
It does not require constant cloud connectivity to run its algorithms, which is an absolute game changer for rural, low-resource deployment.
But wait, how does an AI run offline? How does it actually calculate the difference between a viral and bacterial risk without talking to a server?
It brings the logic of the Dr. Maya algorithm into a localized physical space. The kiosk's internal computer is preloaded with massive decision tree algorithms based on vast epidemiological data sets.
Okay, so the brain is inside the box.
Yes. And the interface is designed to bypass literacy barriers entirely. It uses 9 primary symptom categories displayed as simple, highly visible, culturally recognizable icons.
Right, so even if a patient cannot read the local language fluently, they can easily recognize the visual icon for a high fever or a stomach ache or a chest cough.
Precisely. And then the offline algorithm uses a 3-level refinement process.
How does that work?
So the patient taps the primary symptom icon, let's say cough. The system then presents secondary visual classifications. Is it a dry cough or is it a wet cough? The user selects wet cough. Then it asks for a tertiary detail. What color is the phlegm?
Very specific.
Yes. Based on that specific 3-tiered input, the localized algorithm cross-references its database and spits out the corresponding color code: blue, red, green, or yellow.
And the scale they are attempting with this is hard to wrap your head around. The Prima business plan outlines targets for the year 2030 that are nothing short of monumental. They're aiming to deploy 100,000 of these physical kiosks across rural and semi-urban India.
100,000 units.
Yeah, and they project that this network will serve 100 million people annually.
The systemic impact of evaluating 100 million people before they ever enter a clinic is staggering. The modeling within the business plan projects that this network will directly prevent 10 million unnecessary antibiotic courses from being prescribed every single year.
10 million fewer courses of broad-spectrum bombs dropped into human microbiomes and flushed into the water table.
Which directly translates to saving human lives. By drastically reducing that immense localized evolutionary pressure on the bacterial populations in those communities, the plan estimates saving 50,000 lives annually from severe AMR complications.
And what I found fascinating reading the business plan is that it isn't framed as just a charity project. It's an economic engine.
Yes, the financial incentives.
The plan models generating over 2,000 crore rupees in income for the local rural entrepreneurs who are trained to operate, clean, and maintain these kiosks. It's building a self-sustaining, profitable infrastructure of prevention.
This is where we really have to synthesize the entire picture. If we connect this grassroots, technological, bottom-up approach of the Prima kiosks with the top-down governmental policy approach, we see the complete blueprint for the paradigm shift.
Top-down and bottom-up meeting in the middle.
Exactly. While tools like Dr. Maya and Prima are working to change individual patient behavior from the bottom up, governments are finally working to institutionalize this shift from the top down. We have to go back to the Belgian NAP 2026-2030 for a second, because they are implementing strict systemic governance.
Right. They aren't just putting up polite posters in hospital lobbies asking people to wash their hands anymore. They're taking off the kid gloves.
They really are. They have instituted hard, verifiable targets. As we discussed earlier, they want to reduce total human antibiotic use by 18% compared to their 2019 baseline.
Okay.
But they also have a highly specific target regarding the types of antibiotics doctors are allowed to prescribe. They aim to ensure that 65% of all antibiotic use stays strictly within the WHO's access group.
Right. So for context for the listener, the WHO categorizes antibiotics into access, watch, and reserve. The access group consists of the older, first-choice, narrow-spectrum antibiotics that target specific bugs and have a generally lower potential for triggering massive resistance.
Yes. So Belgium is trying to legally and physically restrict the use of the broader, more dangerous drugs in the watch and reserve categories. They are forcing doctors to use the sniper rifle instead of the shotgun.
And to enforce this, they are getting incredibly proactive with environmental surveillance. I found this part of the document wild. The Belgian plan mandates the strict, continuous monitoring of national wastewater for antimicrobial residues and specific resistance genes.
Wastewater epidemiology.
Yes. How do you test a city's sewage for future medical threats? Like, physically, how does that work?
It is brilliant, really. Long before a patient shows up at a hospital with an untreatable infection, they are shedding the resistant bacteria in their stool.
Right, it goes into the plumbing.
Yes. So the health agencies take samples from municipal wastewater treatment plants and use PCR testing similar to what we use so much for COVID to look for the specific genetic markers, those plasmids we talked about earlier that code for resistance.
So they are literally mapping the genetic mutations brewing in the community's gut microbiome before those superbugs ever breach the hospital doors.
Exactly. It is a massive early warning radar system for pathogens.
But tracking the bugs is only half the battle. How is the Belgian government actually forcing hospitals to change their daily habits? Because doctors are stubborn.
By fundamentally altering the financial incentives of medicine. Historically, as the Belgian document candidly notes, they relied on persuasive, non-binding guidelines for doctors.
Please try to prescribe less.
Right. They issued reports saying exactly that, and it failed completely, because the financial structure of medicine is usually fee-for-service. You get paid for treating a sick patient, not for keeping them healthy.
The incentive is backwards.
Yes. But now, Belgium is moving toward results-based funding.
Money talks.
It is the only thing that changes institutional behavior at scale. Hospitals and clinics will now receive significant financial incentives based on their compliance with valid process and outcome indicators for infection prevention and control, and rigorous antimicrobial stewardship programs.
So wait, if a hospital gets its funding based on how efficiently it prevents infections from spreading in its wards, rather than just how many pills it dispenses or beds it fills, the entire culture of that hospital changes overnight.
It represents a fundamental governmental recognition that relying on voluntary goodwill and patient education is utterly insufficient in the face of a slow-burning catastrophe. We need multi-sectoral, top-down governance.
Mandates from the UN, stuff like that.
Exactly. Mandates from the UN General Assembly, strict directives from the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control, married seamlessly with the high-tech, decentralized grassroots tools like the Prima kiosks and the Dr. Maya triage algorithms.
Okay, I want to step back and look at this massive apparatus we just described.
It's a lot.
It is.
Yeah.
We are talking about colossal global shifts. We're talking about rewiring ingrained human behavior, deploying hundreds of thousands of offline AI kiosks across the developing world, restructuring how hospitals are funded, and constantly testing the sewage of major cities.
It's an unprecedented effort.
I have to ask the ultimate skeptical question, though. Does all of this actually solve the underlying biological problem? Or is this massive, multi-billion-dollar effort just buying us a little bit of time before the bacteria inevitably mutate anyway? Like, are we really solving the problem, or are we just delaying the 2028 tsunami to, say, 2035?
That is the most valid and necessary skepticism to have. But to answer it, we have to look at the mathematics of epidemiology. This isn't just about hiding from the bacteria. It is about actively degrading their evolutionary capacity.
How so?
By isolating patients early, by universally utilizing that blue code in the Dr. Maya system, we are strategically targeting the exact environments the bacteria need to thrive and share their genetic cheat codes.
Explain the math on that. How does me staying home in my bedroom stop a superbug?
The epidemiological epidemiological model suggests that 30% to 50% of all disease transmission occurs in communities and in clinical waiting rooms before a patient is ever formally diagnosed or admitted to a hospital ward.
Wow. So nearly half the spread of these pathogens happens while people are literally just sitting in chairs waiting to be told they are sick.
Precisely. The waiting room is the mixing bowl. If we utilize decentralized triage to stop that transmission at the source, if the Prima kiosk in a rural village or the Dr. Maya app in a suburban home keeps that infectious person isolated, we're doing more than just preventing one person from getting sick.
We're breaking the chain.
We are physically starving the bacteria of the host bodies they require to multiply, mutate, and share plasmids. A bacteria that cannot infect a new host dies out. Its genetic lineage ends. We aren't just buying time. We are actively altering the microscopic battlefield. We are denying the enemy the terrain.
That completely flips the script.
It does. The theoretical model cited in the presentation suggests that by rigorously adhering to this strict triage and isolation philosophy, we could theoretically save 12.3 million lives by the year 2050.
12.3 million.
Yes. It replaces the fundamentally futile attempt to chemically overpower billions of years of evolution with the strategy of intelligent avoidance, strategic containment, and ecological balance.
It is a complete inversion of how modern society thinks about medicine. I mean, we have spent an entire century conditioned to believe that all the power was contained in the pill.
And that's just not true anymore.
Right. These sources, from the granular data of the Graham study to the massive policy shifts in Belgium, are telling us unequivocally that the power is in the process. The power to save modern medicine lies in knowing when to stay home.
It is a sobering, yet ultimately deeply empowering realization. We are currently facing a multi-system biological failure, but the tools required to mitigate it do not require us to wait another decade for a miraculous new pharmaceutical breakthrough that may never come. The tools are organizational, behavioral, and technological, and they are available to us right now.
So let's briefly recap this incredible, albeit terrifying, journey we've taken through these sources today. We started by looking into the stark reality of the approaching 2028 tipping point.
The AMR tsunami.
Right, the tsunami that is threatening to make routine surgeries a life-or-death gamble. We examined how the loud, photogenic pandemics like COVID-19 have tragically distracted global health security from this silent, exponentially accelerating catastrophe.
We then unpacked the systemic, deeply ingrained failure of the miracle cure mindset. We exposed how the immense pressure to prescribe broad-spectrum antibiotics in human clinics, combined with the historical industrial overuse in agriculture, is basically pouring gasoline on the fire of bacterial evolution.
And finally, we explored the radical, necessary paradigm shift. We looked at the brilliant simplicity of the Dr. Maya AI's four-color triage system and the offline Prima kiosks designed to scale that system globally.
It all comes down to isolation.
Exactly. We saw how shifting from a reactive, chemical-dependent waiting room model to a proactive model based on early detection and immediate isolation can literally starve the superbugs of the transmission chains they desperately need to survive.
It is about putting the power of prevention directly into the hands of the individual, while relying on governments to implement strict top-down One Health policies that monitor the environment and restructure the financial incentives of healthcare.
It is a colossal challenge, perhaps the greatest medical challenge of our generation. But the blueprints for survival are clearly, meticulously laid out in these documents. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive today.
It's been a heavy one.
It has. But before we go, I want to leave you listening with a final, highly personal thought to mull over. Next time you feel a scratch in your throat, a sudden, unexplained fever, or a deep cough, pay very close attention to your immediate psychological instinct.
What's your first reaction?
Exactly. Are you rushing to book an appointment, hoping to sit in a clinic and demand a pill to quickly conquer the bug, potentially adding another drop of evolutionary pressure to the coming AMR tsunami? Or can you consciously shift your mindset?
Pick the blue code.
Right. Can you embrace the philosophy of the blue code, isolating yourself, protecting the vulnerable people in your community, and trusting your body, rather than a rapidly failing antibiotic to do the heavy lifting? It seems like a tiny, insignificant decision in the moment, but multiplied by billions of people, it is the exact scale at which this invisible war will be won or lost.
A profound and necessary question for all of us to consider.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the information around you, keep questioning your own instincts, and we'll catch you on the next one.